My brother turned my life into hell, then got my wife pregnant, and now he. Can you even fathom the gut-wrenching moment you realize the woman you swore to love, the mother of your child, has been secretly sharing your bed with your own brother? And the twist? Years later, that very brother came crawling back, begging for help, completely broken, after my parents disowned him and left me a multi-million-dollar inheritance. Trust me, you won't believe what happened next. For as long as I can remember, my younger brother, David, held this deep, simmering resentment toward me. If you're thinking it stemmed from jealousy, you'd be dead wrong. He was the golden child, not me. There was no reason for him to be envious. To really get this, you need some context. Our mom, bless her heart, absolutely indulged David. He was the sun and moon of our family. She cooked his meals, did his laundry, even asked me to help him with his schoolwork. I was just expected to assist him because, family. But I never got that same consideration. I just accepted it. I was pretty independent, I guess. Maybe it was partly my fault, always meeting his needs without ever asking for anything in return. He never helped me, ever. He only ever approached me when he wanted something. I was this quiet, introverted kid, happy studying and keeping to myself. David? He was loud, rough, just like our dad. And I've always been straightforward, honest, never sugarcoating things. I think my mom took that as a negative, like I was difficult. So, David became the family darling, and honestly, growing up, I didn't really mind. But then, things started to go sour. He began bullying me, mocking me for being different. He'd tease me about my height, my glasses. He'd sneak into my room, read my diary, and then run to Mom complaining about what I'd written. When I finally blew up and complained to our parents about him invading my privacy, they just laughed it off. It's not a big deal, they'd say. It was a big deal. He did worse things. He nearly broke my glasses once, put nasty stuff in my food. One time, I found tiny stones in my cereal. Stones! Luckily, I found them before they could damage my teeth. When I told my mom, she dismissed it with a wave of her hand. This is how brothers bond. Brothers bond? Are you serious? Whenever we fought, David would zero in on my insecurities. He knew I was getting bullied at school by a few kids. Instead of having my back, he'd side with them, calling me names like ugly loser or hairy monkey. He even encouraged them to physically hurt me, saying I was just a big failure. Another time, during a fight over something completely trivial, something I can't even remember now, he looked me straight in the eye and told me to kill myself. Most insults I could brush off. That one stung. I was really struggling with my mental health back then. I'm doing better now, thank goodness. But to hear my own brother, my flesh and blood, say he wanted me dead, it was devastating. Dad was usually at work and Mom, well, she just didn't seem to care. She even scolded me once, claiming it was my fault for irritating David. Things just got worse and worse in high school. There was this shocking incident when David actually tried to set my hair on fire. And unbelievably, my mother defended him, saying he was merely playing. Seriously, who plays like that? Thankfully, my dad finally stepped in. He actually sided with me. He pointed out how serious David's actions were. He even threatened to call the police on him. That moment, that was a real eye-opener for David. He had never faced consequences for anything in his life. He was genuinely stunned. And my dad made it crystal clear. Enough was enough. David needed to start respecting his older brother. Later, Dad came into my room to talk. I never expected his support. He always told David how similar they were, and it was true. But that night he admitted he'd waited for years, hoping David would mature. But he was slowly realizing David was just becoming a big bully. Hearing that from my dad, it was incredibly validating. I almost broke down. I confessed everything. Every single thing David had done to me over the years, even the bullying at school. My dad was shocked at how much I'd endured. The very next day, he spoke to the principal, made sure those bullies were warned about severe consequences. Later that evening, He enrolled me in MMA at our local gym, told me I needed to man up and stand up for myself. I know, a nerdy kid like me trying to learn to fight? It probably sounded laughable, but I was focused. So focused. I balanced my studies, my daily workouts, and those MMA classes completely changed my life. My physique, my confidence, everything. Then, one day, David was at it again. He stole my pocket money. Money I'd earned helping with chores. Money I'd been saving for ages. He snuck into my room and took it. I caught him just as he was about to cycle off with his friends. I demanded he give it back. David just sneered at me, said all I could do was run to Daddy. I don't know what came over me, but I punched him, right in the face. He was stunned, fell backward. I snatched my money from his pocket, then shoved him back down. He started crying loudly. It was, I won't lie, pretty comical. But of course, my mother rushed out, all concerned. When she found out I'd hit him, she was surprised, then furious. She reprimanded me, told me I needed to be a better role model for David. And David, seeing me scolded, just ate it up. She even complained to my dad, saying I needed to be controlled. My dad, though, he looked grim. He asked both of us to explain. I told him how David had stolen my hard-earned money. David, on the other hand, tried to justify it, said he needed the money for a date, that as his brother I should help him. Dad just looked at him. You're lucky, he said, his voice low. I only let your brother punch you. Anyone else would have called the police for stealing. He kept going, telling David he had no right to take other people's things. David did not like that. He threw a tantrum, probably hoping Mom would step in. But Dad stayed firm. When David realized he wasn't going to be punished for being hit, he screamed how much he hated me and ran back to his room, locking himself in. After that, David started distancing himself. He finally understood he couldn't bully me anymore. Even Dad had stopped enabling his antics. For the first time in a long, long while, I felt like we were equals. He couldn't physically harm me, but he'd resort to verbal insults when our parents weren't around. His behavior just worsened with age. Angrier, more short-tempered every year. If I asked him a question, he'd ignore me, muttering nerd or loser under his breath. If he needed to communicate something, he'd relay it through our mom rather than speak to me directly. When I questioned her about it, she just urged me to be more understanding. I couldn't tell if it was just puberty or genuine hatred. It got unbearable. I just longed to move out, to get away. I even begged my mom repeatedly to mediate a sit-down conversation to help us fix things. She always refused, saying she didn't want to get involved. Eventually, I left for my dream university, a scholarship student. My dad threw a party for me, and even my mom seemed proud. David, though, aloof, distant, barely acknowledged my achievements. The day I left for college was a strange mix of excitement for the future and this profound relief to escape that toxic home environment. Those first few months at university were liberating. New friends, great classes, building a life completely separate from the oppressive atmosphere of my childhood. The constant fear of David's verbal attacks just lifted, a newfound peace. In my second year, I met Karen at a frat party. We just clicked, instantly. Coming from a religious background, having kids outside of marriage was frowned upon. So, when we discovered she was pregnant in our final year, we decided to marry right after graduation. Our wedding was small but joyful. Our parents were happy. We celebrated. At that moment, I truly believed Karen was the love of my life. I'd always envisioned a monogamous relationship. One woman to come home to share my life with. Other women showed interest over the years, but I never pursued anything. I was genuinely content. Karen was my dream girl. I never wanted to hurt her. But then I uncovered 2 incidents of infidelity. One was an intermittent affair with her married coworker, spanning several years. The other, a brief fling with an ex-boyfriend during a visit to her family. Looking back, maybe I was naive. I can't completely disagree. Each time we separated for a while, and each time I chose to forgive her. I didn't want our child to grow up in a broken home. I truly believed we could overcome it. The coworker affair happened when we were young. I attributed it to youthful mistakes, poor judgment, and for a while, things seemed to get better. I could never fully trust her again, not really, but I did my best to set aside my doubts. If I chose to forgive, I had to genuinely work towards a fresh start. It had been 4 years since her second betrayal. For years, I felt confident. We were genuinely happy, planning our family's future. Then, 3 months ago, my world shattered once more. She dropped a bomb. She'd been having a long-term affair. And then she added, almost as an afterthought, that our son might not be mine. Her words struck me like a ton of bricks. Shock, betrayal, disbelief, a sickening mix. I struggled to comprehend the enormity of her confession. In a daze, I managed to ask why she had kept such a secret and how she could do something so devastating. Her reaction? Cold, indifferent, as if she were detached from the pain she was causing. Her vague responses just left me with more questions. It was surreal, painful, confronting this shattered trust, this terrifying uncertainty about my own family. I kept pressing. I deserved the truth, the father of the child I'd been raising since birth. Finally, she admitted it. It was David. My eyes widened. I couldn't even form the words. What did she mean? She explained. When I'd introduced her to my family, she'd stayed with us from Thanksgiving until New Year's. David, usually cold and distant with me, was warm, polite, even charming to her. I was actually glad, hoping she'd feel welcome. Karen, wanting to be accepted, spent a lot of time with my mom. She noticed the rift between David and me and questioned me about it. I opened up, told her about our strained relationship, how I thought we'd never repair it. Karen understood, or so I thought. She started including David in our outings, hoping it would help us bond. Movie nights, whatever he wanted to watch. David and I even exchanged a few words then, an improvement from his usual silent treatment. I remember them hanging out, playing video games. I never thought anything of it. Then Karen told me David had opened up to her one day, vulnerable after a breakup. He struck up a friendship. She mentioned he'd harmlessly flirt with her when I wasn't around. And then eventually, things escalated beyond her control. The vision of my wife and brother together, it made me feel sick. She confessed she felt guilty afterward and left him, which matched her abrupt decision to go home instead of spending New Year's with me. I tried to convince her to stay, but she was adamant. When we met back at college, she was her usual cheerful self. I didn't question anything. 2 weeks later, we found out she was pregnant. Karen admitted she didn't know if the child was mine or David's. And with no way to prove it, she chose to stay with me, knowing I was the more dependable brother. That's why we got married. My world was crashing down. The son I loved might not even be mine. I asked her if she'd been sleeping with David recently. She slowly nodded. They had always stayed in touch. Their chemistry was undeniable. They'd sneak off to hotels, lying to me about working overtime. Half of her business trips? Romantic getaways with him. Why? I choked out. Why did you marry me if you wanted my brother? She said she didn't want to be the one to break off the marriage. She saw me as a wonderful father to our son, so she decided to stay. In her words, I made a mistake, and I didn't know when to stop. I looked at her, my heart a hollow space. I'm glad you told me the truth, I said, my voice eerily calm. But I'm packing up and leaving. She started crying then, asking for forgiveness. She expected me to yell, to rage. Instead, I just calmly packed my clothes. She insisted that if I truly loved her, I should fight for her. Mistakes happen in every marriage, she pleaded. When she realized I wasn't budging, she changed tactics. Think about our son. He'll be affected by a divorce. Children shouldn't be raised in broken homes. I looked at her. I reminded you, I said, my voice flat. He might not even be my father. That made her cry harder, accuse me of being cruel. It seemed she genuinely believed nothing could make me walk away. Maybe it was partly my fault, letting things slide in the past. While I did love her, it felt more like that love stemmed from believing we had a son together, from a shared history since college. She kept insisting it wasn't too late to fix things, but I had no patience left. Trust was utterly shattered. Her words felt hollow. Even if I forgave her, I could never forget she slept with my brother. I've always believed in forgiving mistakes, because we're all flawed. But this was beyond acceptable limits. I left her crying on the doorstep and checked into a hotel. The very next day, I went straight to my parents. I revealed everything. My wife's affair with David. How they'd been secretly sleeping together for years. The shock on their faces was undeniable. My mother, true to form, initially tried to defend David. My boy could never do such a thing to his own brother, she insisted. Determined to expose the truth, I asked them to remain silent. Let me call David in front of them. I told them to stay quiet so I could catch him off guard, make him think it was a private conversation. When David answered, I confronted him. At first, he vehemently denied it, refused to take responsibility. But when I told him Karen had admitted everything, he flipped. He started blaming her, calling her characterless. He actually claimed it wasn't his fault if women were attracted to him, and that he was the better-looking brother. I'm going to expose you to everyone, I told him, my voice firm. He mocked me. No one will believe you. I'm the golden child. I scoffed. Thanks for confirming the truth, David, I said, because by then I knew my parents had heard every word. David went quiet. Then he spluttered, trying desperately to explain himself, to salvage his image. My mother, still reeling in shock, demanded an explanation. He stuttered through a feeble attempt to justify his actions, blaming everyone else, desperately trying to shift the blame onto Karen. But even my mom, his staunchest defender, now looked at him with a mix of disappointment and anger. In that charged moment, I felt a strange sense of vindication. For years, I had endured his torment. Now the truth was out. The roles were reversed. It was David who stood exposed, his actions laid bare for everyone to see. As David's pathetic words faltered, my father, usually so reserved, couldn't contain his disappointment. He took the phone from me. David, he began, his voice heavy with a weight I'd rarely heard. What you've done isn't just a betrayal of your brother. It's a betrayal of this family. You slept with your brother's wife. You continued the affair even after they were married. Your actions have severe consequences. You have irreversibly shattered the trust we had in you. I raised both of you to value family, loyalty, decency. What you've shown today defies everything I've tried to teach you. He paused, letting the silence hang, letting his words sink in. Your disregard for your brother's feelings, the lack of respect for his marriage, it's unacceptable. Your mother and I, we are partly to blame for what you've become. But we will no longer tolerate this behavior. From today, you are cut off from the college funds I set up for you. You'll have to figure out how to pay your university fees on your own. I will also stop funding your lifestyle. Do you think it makes you more of a man to sleep with married women? Let's see how you manage without my money. Throughout this, I remained composed. I wanted to scream at David, initially, but watching my dad punish him like that, it was the ultimate vindication. I had exposed his true nature, and he had clearly underestimated the consequences. My mother, despite David's persistent protests, still tried to justify him. But my father swiftly ended the call, shutting down David's desperate attempts to explain away his actions. Afterward, my mom approached me. She hugged me. It had been so long since we shared such a moment. But in that embrace, there was an unspoken understanding, a genuine support. Amidst the family turmoil, she apologized. For not believing you all this time, she whispered. My 14-year-old self could never have imagined this moment. Being vindicated, embraced by my mother. Following all this, my dad helped me find a good lawyer. Karen and her lawyer tried to fight dirty, asking for alimony since I earned more. But her affair played heavily in my favor. We also conducted a paternity test, and just as Karen had suggested, it was confirmed David was indeed the father. The news was incredibly painful, even worse than discovering Karen's infidelity. I was furious. The son I had loved and raised, the boy I had poured my heart into, wasn't mine. But I decided to stay strong. Karen begged me to continue visiting our son, arguing he shouldn't be punished. But I couldn't bear to see him. He reminded me too much of David, and I hated it. I need to explain something about Henry, my son. Many of you might be wondering why I'm no longer in contact with him, and some might even call me cruel. But I have to say, I am simply not comfortable raising another man's child. This isn't a stepson situation where I knew from the start. I was led to believe Henry was my son, only to later discover he was actually my brother David's. This revelation hurt deeply, and I cried over it for days. The main reason I don't want any contact with Henry is because I no longer want Karen in my life. If I remain connected to her child, she will find a way to re-enter my life, and I desperately need my space. You may think I'm cruel or selfish, but I can't see him again. Not for a very, very long time. After my divorce was finalized, a sense of freedom washed over me. I moved into my own bachelor pad. It felt surreal to live alone. I'd married so young, never really had the chance to experience true independence. But my naturally independent nature allowed me to adapt quickly, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. About 2 weeks ago, my dad called. He told me he was changing his will. He didn't want to leave anything to David. My dad is incredibly stubborn. Once he decided to cut David out of his life, that was it. David had tried reaching out, even showed up at their doorstep begging for forgiveness, but they refused to let him in. Even my mother, who usually caved to David's tantrums, seemed done with him. Though, it must have been hardest for her. David never texted me to apologize, not once, showing he didn't regret his actions, just being cut off from our parents. My dad then told me he planned to leave everything to me. Make sure David couldn't contest it. He'd leave David only $1. My eyes widened in shock. My dad had worked hard his entire life. His assets, retirement fund, life insurance, nearly $2 million. The only condition in his will was that if he passed before my mom, she'd continue living in their house, even though ownership would transfer to me. I didn't mind. I wanted to care for my mom in her final days anyway. Somehow David found out, and honestly, it wasn't hard to figure out how. Most of you correctly guessed it was my mother who informed David about my dad changing his will, leading David to call me as a last resort. I confronted her right in front of my dad. She broke down, saying I had punished David enough, and he had learned his lesson. My dad, though, was firm. He told my mother that if she believed what David did was forgivable, then he could no longer stay married to her, because he could never forgive such a betrayal. That threat silenced my mother instantly. My dad made it clear if she ever talked with David again, and we found out, she could pack her bags and leave. As I mentioned, my dad is very stubborn. Hopefully, my mother will learn from her mistakes. Anyway, unable to reach our parents, David called me yesterday, trying to make amends. He explained how he was struggling with college, how Karen, after discovering the paternity, had been pestering him for child support. He said he had no money, couldn't find a part-time job. He begged me to talk to our family, to start fresh. He really needed my help. I laughed, right in his face. I'm done with you, I told him. You should have thought about the consequences before sleeping with my wife and getting her pregnant. David tried to argue, said I was being unfair, that Karen was also to blame. I agree, I said, cutting him off. And I divorced her. She's your responsibility now. Don't call me complaining about her or the child. These are the consequences of your actions. He started to raise his voice. I interrupted him again. You're no longer the favored child, David. You're the black sheep, the one who slept with his own brother's wife. At that moment, David started to cry, full-on sobbing, telling me how everyone, grandparents, relatives, had turned against him. While it was true, it was no longer my concern. We're done, I told him, my voice firm. Don't ever call me again. I no longer consider him my brother. Since then, I've replayed that conversation over and over. Despite my hatred for him, I had never heard him cry like that. Not since we were kids. I won't lie. It did hurt me a bit to see him so helpless. It's been 5 months since that phone call. My relationship with my parents has improved dramatically. My dad and I go golfing every weekend now. He treats me more like a buddy than a son, which is really cool. Although my mother misses David, she has stayed away from him. The last I heard about David was from my cousin. Apparently, he's been asking everyone for money, and eventually had to drop out of college because he couldn't afford the fees. He and Karen are living together now, and he has a part-time job as a mechanic. Apparently, they are raising Henry together, which is a good thing, I guess. I never discussed David with my parents, and they don't bring him up either. For everyone asking, I am doing quite well. I was promoted at my job 2 months ago, so my salary has significantly improved. I haven't been dating anyone. I feel like I still need time and space to heal. I've been going to therapy, so we'll see how that works out. So, what do you think? Have you ever faced such a betrayal, or had to cut off a family member completely? What would you have done in my place? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Hit that notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories like this one. Thanks for watching.